what we want to start off with is your ISO. Okay, your ISO is basically your camera's sensibility to light. So the higher your ISO is, the more sensitive your camera is going to be to light. We're going to take a few photos with a high ISO, so it's the picture's blown out, and a low ISO so you guys can see the difference. All right, let's go ahead and start taking some pictures. I want to make a correction to what I said before in regards to sensibility. I think I might need some sensibility. I meant sensitivity. When you increase your ISO, your sensor becomes more sensitive to light, as you can see in these images here. All we did with this image was increase the ISO to 500, and these are the results. Aperture. Your aperture is controlled by your lens. The wider your aperture is, the more light comes in through the camera. The smaller your aperture is, the less light that comes into your camera or hits your sensor. So this next part we're gonna do is we're gonna work with our aperture. First, we're gonna get a proper exposure with our aperture. Then we're gonna increase and even decrease the aperture so that way you guys can see how it affects your picture. There's two things that your aperture does. It controls the amount of light that comes into your camera or hits your sensor. Second thing it does, it controls your depth of field. The bigger your aperture is, the more shallower your depth of field. That's how you obtain those images where your subject is very sharp, or whatever you're shooting is very sharp, and your foreground and your background are blurred out. If you bump up that number to, let's say, even 5.6 or 8, then more of your image becomes in focus. So you have a broader depth of field. So things that are behind you or in front of you will now come into focus. So that's what your aperture does. And we're gonna play around with those settings so you guys can get used to it. Like I said, if you have to pause this so you can take some sample shots yourself, go ahead and do so. Rewind it as many times as you need to until you learn, okay? So let's go ahead and start taking some pictures. So in this image we can see what a low aperture or f-stop can do to an image. It really blurs out your background and brings into focus your foreground. The complete opposite happens when you increase your aperture to, let's say, 7.1, where it'll bring most of your image, if not all of your image, into focus. Now, your third and final one with this little trinity of settings here is your shutter speed. Your shutter controls the duration of that light that hits your sensor. Okay, so the longer your shutter speed is, the more light that's going to come in and hit your sensor, and the brighter your pictures will be. The faster your shutter speed, the less light that comes in. So now let's move on to our shutter portion of this tutorial, and we're going to capture some still images of something moving fast. We'll find something and we'll take a picture of it using a slow shutter speed and a fast shutter speed. As you can see, with a fast shutter speed, your object or your subject looks like they were just frozen in time. With this next image that we've got coming up, we slowed the shutter speed down to 100. We compensated by bringing up the aperture to about f14. So as you can see, there's a dramatic difference with a fast and slow shutter speed.